And the cock crowed. Chapter 3. He has risen! Sitting in the garden, his back propped against the log by the dirt trail, at front of the house, Peter opened his eyes and looked at the man towering above him. "What is it that you say?" Peter asked. "Jesus has risen. All in the city have heard." Peter recognized that he had seen the man, but he didn't know him. "Who are you?" Peter asked. "You don't know me?" "I am John, from Bethany. I was there with you, with Jesus, at the Mount of Olives when he spoke. Now the stone is rolled back, and the tomb is empty. Some in Jerusalem have seen him. He is alive. The Master lives." "It's not what you say," Peter said. "Jesus has left us. He will not return. It falls on us now, his disciples, to bring the message to the world. The tomb is empty, and some say they have seen him, raised from the grave, alive, and in the flesh. Have you seen him? I told you he has left us. Ask no more. Remember the teachings. I have nothing more to tell you." With a sorrowful look, John nodded his head as though to convey respect. He turned and walked back along the dirt trail toward Jerusalem. Peter watched others of the disciples pack their essentials and go along their way toward their homes. Peter's troubled mind wanted no more. Silence, rest. This was all he imagined as he observed the so familiar scene before him. With the others leaving, he had to stay, for he had promised Judas that he would. On the fourth day, Andrew returned. Peter was sitting on the log by the trail. "It has been a week now," Andrew said. "Has Judas not returned?" "He will come," Peter said. "I told him to come." "There are rumors that he is dead. Some say he was seen swinging from a tree hung by the neck. Others say he fell headlong into a gully and his bowels gushed out and he is dead. He is not coming back. Come, let's go." Peter peered up at Andrew. "He cannot be dead. What did he do? He was protecting Jesus, that is all. He was protecting the Master from a self-deluded man. He did no wrong. He cannot be dead." "Give it up," Andrew said. "It is unfair," Peter cried. "He cannot be dead. Oh God, what have we done?" Peter bowed his head and wept. "Did you know? The tomb was opened," Andrew said. "Simon, a rich man, had put this other man, the one they crucified and mistook as Jesus, in his family tomb, for none of his relatives were there to claim the body. You know that under our laws the body cannot be buried on the Sabbath, yet burial must take place within a day and a night. Simon offered his family tomb for the burial, a new tomb he had just cut, so to observe our laws and give the man a proper burial. He was buried on eve of the Sabbath, well into the evening." "Buried in the tomb of another's family? Is that proper?" "He was from Gadara, and his family could not be notified. He had relatives in Jerusalem. On the third day the stone was rolled away, and they took his body to Gadara for a proper burial. But it was seen in Jerusalem that the stone had been rolled away and the tomb empty, and many believed that Jesus had risen from the dead. Did not Mary, John, and James go and tell them it was another man, not Jesus? They saw it. They were there." "They did, yes." "So why? Why the confusion?" Andrew laughed and shook his head and looked penetratingly at Peter. Are you to challenge Rome? Peter lowered his head, cradling it in his hand, and put a hand to his chest. Rome, the authority. God help us. Get ready. We'll leave for Galilee tomorrow, Andrew said. At the break of dawn, Andrew and Peter began their journey home. Peter was anxious, wanting to again see his wife. He had forgotten how long it had been, many weeks, maybe months. The trail led along a high mountain ridge. Peter could see the Dead Sea far down off to his right, and the Great Sea a long distance off on the other side, its blue sea sparkling in the bright morning sunlight, the sky cloudless, a deep blue, the surrounding trees and brush alive with chirps, caws, and screeches of birds of many kinds. Shira could not have seemed more beautiful when Peter entered the house in Capernaum in Galilee. His wife of just 6 years, he well remembered their tearful parting, yet he knew he could not be staying long, though he had crafted no plan for the mission given. You are the rock upon which I will build my church. The words rang through Peter's mind. Shira had showed understanding from the beginning, from the time that Jesus had ministered to her mother and had made her well. Peter away often, the greater good was paramount. The Lord of hosts, the future of Israel, all stood in the balance. You are exhausted, Shira said, and she brought him into the bedroom to sleep. Brushing his head with her hand, her long black hair dangling over his eyes, the fine ends of her hair delightfully tickling him, dancing upon his forehead, she kissed him and caressed his head until he fell asleep. I will go, Peter cried out, jumping up from in his bed. You are dreaming. Shira placed her arms around Peter and guided her head back to the pillow. Sleep, she said. You've had a rough time. You will need your strength. The sight of Jesus, though only a dream, had soothed Peter and brought his confidence back to him. He had his directions now. Go back to Jerusalem. There would begin his new mission. But for the moment, he would rest and have time with his wife here in Capernaum. The thought pleased him, and he imagined the road ahead. How difficult would it be? Peter, a lowly fisherman from a small fishing town, Jesus had done miraculous things, healing and performing all kinds of miracles. How could he fill these shoes? What could he offer? He lay face up, wondering what things were about to transpire. He propped his head with his arm and turned and looked at Shira. She had fallen back to sleep and was snoring lightly. How could his simple life have taken such an abrupt turn? He at table with the Messiah in Jerusalem for the Passover. Then nothing happens, just another man crucified. A very typical event in present times under the harsh rule of Pontius Pilate. Now he and the others are on the run as though they are criminals. But they had done no wrong, nor had Jesus. Now he is to build a church, and he had no idea why, or how, or where. Would he see Jesus again in flesh? Late early morning, 2 weeks since arriving in Galilee, Andrew and Matthew appeared at Peter's door. We are returning to Jerusalem, Andrew said. Peter nodded. I will come, he answered. He invited them in. Shira embraced Peter. I know you must go, but when you are settled, and when you have founded the church, the new church of the Lord, Then you shall send for me, and I will come." Peter nodded. "I will," he said, not glancing back, out of fear he would change his mind and stay. The day was calm, the sky blue, the Sea of Galilee sparkling in the distance as Peter and his brother and Matthew set out for Jerusalem. They came upon where John lived. Seeing them from a distance, John waved, and his brother James appeared beside him. "Through the Lord we knew you were coming," John said. "It came to me this morning in a vision. Peter, you were there and appeared before me. And you had set the table just like where we had gathered for the Last Supper that we had with Jesus at Jerusalem." "But I had no such dream or vision," said Peter. "In my dream, Jesus spoke to me. 'John will tell you where to go,' he had said." Traveling on, the disciples came into Magdala, and they came upon the house of Mary, the disciple of Jesus, to bid her farewell. Yet she too stood ready, at the door waiting. "Jesus was here," Mary said, "and he told me to be ready, that you would come and that I should go with you." "He was here in a dream?" Peter asked. But Mary seemed puzzled. "He was here. Was it a dream?" Mary said. "I don't know how to answer you. I can only say he was here, and he told me to be ready." Peter now and the others of the disciples were the more puzzled. Mary, too, speaking in riddles? Perhaps she was indeed the closest of his disciples, as some had said. At Jerusalem, Peter and his brother, and John and his brother James, and Matthew and Mary gathered at the upper room of the house of Simon inside the city walls, where the 11, Jesus and Judas Iscariot, had all gathered just a month and fortnight before. Thomas was there this day at the house, and he greeted the travelers. "As the Lord promised, you have returned to Jerusalem," Thomas said, and he gave each a warm embrace and a kiss. "You have not seen Jesus?" asked Peter. "I arrived here from Ponsada yesterday," Thomas said. "Simon and the Zealot and James, son of Alphaeus, have gone off. They will return tonight. Thaddeus is here, nearby. Only Philip I have not seen. Bartholomew, too. I have not seen Bartholomew. The food is waiting." Thomas waved his hand toward the table, where there was bread in abundance. By the next day, all of the 11 had arrived, and with Mary there were 12. As evening approached, Peter sensed Jesus there in spirit, but from out of the darkness Jesus appeared. "You are here," said Peter. He felt a surreal quality about the room, as though he were dreaming and yet awake. Jesus came up to the table and was at center, to where he had stood before when he had broken bread with them. Feeling anxious yet relaxed, Peter's eyes watered, tears rolled down his cheek, his eyes fixed upon Jesus, the Master, alive in the flesh, here at table, as it had been so many times before. "Come," Jesus said, looking at Mary, who was standing away from the table near the wall, and she joined the others at the table. Then Jesus looked about the table, preparing to address the group. "I go now to the Father," Jesus said, "and where I go, you cannot come. This must happen for you to inherit the powers that God gave me. Each of you, as you go forth and teach the message, the Holy One will be on you, and from your hands will come healings and miracles that the world will witness. Your names You, descendants of Abraham, like those of Isaac's sons, Jacob and Esau, will go out over the earth, and people of many tongues will hear of you and will honor you. As each of you have lived many lives and spoken many tongues, so on this day shall your calling be fulfilled. As the Ancient One comes into you and speaks words and tongues that you in this life have not known. The self endures all. From the self we emerge, and to the self we shall return. At that a halo, an aura distinctly brilliantly white, glowed around Jesus' head, and a great wave of blissfulness engulfed Peter's whole being. And Peter saw a brilliant light emanating from others who were near Jesus. And all of the 12 began speaking in languages that Peter had never heard. Yet he seemed to know what it was that they were saying. And it was that men of all faiths and nationalities and religions and positions in government, and all people, rich and poor, young and old, male and female, were equal and the same. And a white light engulfed Jesus, and he was gone, just the 12 remaining. What did you see? Where is Jesus? Peter asked his brother Andrew. I saw the heavens open, and Jesus rose up from the room and was lifted up to heaven, Andrew said. It was not like that, said James. Jesus was there, and then he wasn't. He just disappeared. But I felt his presence expanding, and the totality of it overpowering me as he did. But Mary had the coolest voice and calmest demeanor. Jesus just walked out from the room, she said. And she looked over toward the door that was open, that led to the stairway into the garden in the courtyard. There was nothing unordinary about it, except that he will not be returning. How can that be? Said Peter. We were all here, and what we saw was through our own eyes. Yes, but you have yet to understand your own eyes, Thomas said, a wide grin crossing his face. Do not fear, Mary added. Jesus has not left us. He has only left the group of us. She made a knowing glance at Thomas, and she too smiled. Peter wondered if he was being toyed with, yet so powerful had been the event that the 12 all piled out of the room, down the stairs, into the street. A crowd formed around the disciples as they entered into the street. The temple visible from where they were, they walked toward it, a larger crowd forming about them as they went. People of various races and from various lands. Parthians and Medes, Elamites, and those dwelling in Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia, Egypt, and the parts of Libya adjoining Syre, visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs. From all of the world they had come for the harvest celebration. And as they walked, the Spirit of the Holy One of Israel, who had entered the 12, came to those among them and dwelled within them that day. Coming into the temple courtyard, Peter stopped and stood on a large stone, and he gazed about at the people. Hundreds now surrounding Peter and the other disciples in the courtyard. God, give me strength, he thought in his mind. Brethren, Peter shouted. The crowd quieted. God be with me, he imagined in his mind, and he spoke. The Holy One who has come near to us on this day of harvest, dwelling among us in flesh, performing many miracles, so that the blind may see, and the lame may walk, and the deaf hear, that we will see and hear and will understand that he, the Holy One of Israel, is the Lord, and there is no other Lord than he. As David, our king of prior days, says of him, I foresaw the Lord always before my face. My heart rejoiced, and my tongue was glad. My flesh also rests in hope. For you will not leave my soul in emptiness, nor will you allow your Holy One to see corruption. You have made known to me the ways of life. Full of joy am I in your presence. Men and brethren, let me speak freely to you. This Jesus God has raised up to heaven, of which we all are witnesses, having received from the Father the promise of the Spirit of the Holy One, who lives amongst us. He pours out that which you now see and hear. Fear came upon the crowd, yet Peter, filled with light, joyful with the blissfulness of this day's happenings, was not shaken. Feeling great power and courage, he raised his hand up to deliver the Holy One's power to those all about him, and they rose, their voices in a great roar, chanting loudly and confidently, Great is the Holy One of Israel. And the disciples all began speaking in many tongues, and the people all rejoiced, for they heard and understand the words that were spoken that day, though the languages of these people were many and varied. And the message that they heard was, Rejoice and be glad, for the Holy One of Israel had come to dwell within the walls of the city on this day of the harvest festival. Peter and the others of the 11 and Mary all went into the temple, and they bowed down and gave thanks to the Holy One of Israel, and they remained near and in the temple, giving thanks to God. On the 4th day after Jesus had been lifted up to heaven, Peter and John were walking to the temple when a man who had been lame from birth, sitting at the temple gate, saw and recognized the 2 disciples, and he asked them to give him a blessing. Fixing his eyes on the man, Peter said, Look at us. And the man held out his hand, hoping to receive something from them. But Peter admonished him, saying, I have no silver or gold, but in the name of the Holy One of Israel, rise up and walk. Peter lifted the man to his feet, and immediately he received strength. Leaping up, he walked and entered the temple with Peter and John, praising God as he went. People all about recognized the man who had been lame all his life, yet was walking now, and they bowed down and gave praise to God. But when Peter saw this, he said, Men of Israel, why do you marvel at this? Why look at us as though it is by our power or godliness that we have made this man walk? The Holy One of Israel is he who removes from us decay and makes us well. It is by the power of Jesus that this man now walks, cried a man from within the crowd. The Holy One is here with us in flesh this day, said Peter. He is here with us and is all around us, but you do not see him. Peter said, not fully cognizant of what he was saying, yet knowing that what he was saying was right and true. Peter and the others came back to the temple each day for a time. Many people were healed, and numerous more came into the city, praising the God of heaven and Israel. But the high priest Caiaphas confronted Peter one day, while he and the 12 were there at the temple. Peter, he said, we have watched and seen the things that you and your disciples are doing, and we have not intervened, nor have we disrespected you, nor have we disallowed you access into the temple. Yet the governor, Pontius Pilate, who holds authority over this holy city, sends warning that he is displeased and troubled by what you do, that you perform healings and miracles in the name of a God, not of the Romans, and that you exercise authority by which you have not been granted. Leave the city, or I will be forced to detain you. Leave it quickly. Andrew stepped forward as if to confront Caiaphas, but Peter waved him back. This warning comes to us not from Caiaphas, nor from Pilate, nor Rome. It is the Holy One who speaks. Our day is here. We must go now to the outer regions of the empire and tell all who will listen of the Holy One and the good news of salvation. Praise be to God, the others cried out, and they left the city, each by different ways.